Hey, so the origin Snout Spout figure, he has his head on by default. People keep saying it's 2002 head. It's not. It's his Filmation head design, which is pretty neat. I don't think he's had a toy before. He's called Hose Nose in the first appearance. I don't remember if it keeps up. But that was his work in progress name. So they just called him Hose Nose in the cartoon. His coloration is very different. I don't display his head on mine because I like the the vintage style head. But I wouldn't mind having a Hose Nose in my collection. So let's make it custom. Now he's not this bright blaze orange in the cartoon. He's more of a deep tan color. Which might be skin, might just be a duller tan. Originally I used a He-Man figure, but then I got thinking, that's not quite bright enough for that. But you know who would work well for that? Jitsu. So we'll be using Jitsu's body for this. And actually, to save myself painting trouble, he has a furry loincloth in the Filmation series. And to get that nice dark blue one, we'll be using the Mini Comic Stratos. Now he has a red belt, so we could theoretically use the original Stratos release, but the blue is a lighter color. So I will disassemble those figures and show you the parts we'll need and what needs to be done with them. And here are all the parts we'll be using to build Hose Nose. We disassembled the figures using hot water. If you don't know how, I'm sure plenty of tutorials, but pretty much just submerge any of the joints in them, pull apart by default in hot water, or I guess you can use a hairdryer, and you can tear them apart after letting them soak for a while. So, next we'll have to sand the figure. So the big problem with sanding, for one, we have an extra tooth for the paint to grab, but also we have to worry about rubbing. So, for example, when we put this arm in here, this entire area right here is in danger of rubbing the paint off, so we'll have to sand down some layer of this. We probably won't be sanding any of the pieces we don't need to paint. However, I may sand very lightly this area right here, just to remove some of the flashing, but also just to remove a little bit of extra area where it could potentially catch the paint and damage it. That'd be the only area we're going to be sanding on this piece. The legs won't need any sanding, neither will the head, or the axe, or the tanks. May potentially go in and paint these in matching red. I'm not sure on that, but we'll get to that point later. So we'll need sanded. This area will need sanded. We'll need to sand actually the joint itself to get the paint on there and have it stick. That'll be a bit of a pain, but you can do it. Then both of those. The hands will need sanded. I'll probably end up taking one of my files. I have a round file, and just will slide up and down in the hand to get that area cleaned out. We'll paint that, and hopefully the paint will stay there. We'll need to sand the wrist joint especially. I think we can just bend this forward, get in there, then bend it this way. Getting there. We'll have that sanded. Do it on both hands. The waist, we don't need to sand anything on the blue. The blue's a good color, we want to keep that. So we're just going to be mostly focusing on the belt. We'll lightly sand the front just to get the paint to stick better. But up here, the whole outer rim, paint likely would be torn by turning the waist. So we'll be sanding this area especially. We don't want to sand it hyper flat because we want to keep the detail. However, we do want to sand it down enough that there's enough room for it to hopefully not get grabbed by that and torn. We'll see how it works. And then to repeat, more or less, we'll be repeating the same thing we would for on the wrist for the ankles. And the feet, we need to sand the interior somewhat so that way the paint here doesn't tear. And we don't want to do too much because that could also make the ankle loose. Unfortunately, I've never worked with Snout Spout's feet before, so I don't really know how much I'll need to do for eyeballing it. That's the problem with the unique sculpted pieces of Snout Spout. I don't know how much will need done, so it'll be a lot of trial and error, unfortunately. However, it shouldn't be that hard. And finally, his harness. Now, this really won't need sanded very much. It's also very flexible plastic, so I'm not sure if I'll do much. I will probably try to lightly sand the actual notches to slip through, potentially, to get a little more wiggle room there. I'm not going to bother painting the inside. So, what we'll be using, we're going to be using sandpaper. Now, I'm going to be using 2 or 3 different grits of sandpaper. Nothing crazy. It's rather even, but you can see. So we have a 400 grit, and the other piece I have is a 600 grit. Higher the grit, the finer it is. We don't want to use anything too harsh because we obviously want to have a nice finish. I do have some harsher ones, potentially for like the upper part of the belt, just to move through that a little bit quicker, but nothing crazy. I'll be wearing a mask when I sand. I always wear a mask. I should be wearing a mask just moving that. I will also be using a set of files I have and my Dremel. However, if you want to do this job and you don't have those pieces yourself, I think you can probably get by without them. Honestly, you can actually buy Dremel bits, for rotary sander or whatever the generic is, and just use those as a small file. There's very small, nice pieces. You can use that. So I will cut away. I'll sand all this, and I'll be back to show you what I did, and then we'll get to painting. And back. Alright, everything's been sanded. The best I can do is a rough guess because I've never worked with the Snout Spout pieces before. You might be able to see I sanded down pretty much any area that should be in danger of rubbing. I didn't go too crazy on the gloves because I need to, but I really did try to sand out the inner part here so the wrist won't catch too much. Sanded down the actual joint of the wrist as well and the area around. Hopefully they'll work very nicely. They're still a little bit wet. I just washed them because after sanding, you always want to, whenever you want to do a custom figure, you always want to clean the figure best you can. Alcohol drying well enough, but since I sanded everything, I put it through a soap and water clean first, then I use an alcohol rub on top of that, just to get it all out. So it's finishing drying here, and then we'll get to painting. So traditionally, you'd expect to prime it now, and on almost any other job, I'd say, yeah, we're going to prime it. However, for whatever bizarre reason, the Folk Art multi-surface paint, yes, the stuff you can buy at Walmart, sticks incredibly well to Master Year's Origins plastic. Both the more hard type and the very flexible kind. I've painted a few armor different pieces with this in the past couple months. It works really well. I don't know why. It's not particularly good on resin casts or any pieces like that. It doesn't stick very well to those. But for some reason, this type of plastic, it sticks incredibly well. So we're just going to be painting directly onto it and see how it goes. For the red for Hose Nose, for his boots, gloves, and belt, we're just going to be using this fire engine red. Or excuse me, engine red. It's a sort of dark red. It's pretty close. We'd rather not mix paint if we don't have to. When this is close enough, we're just going to go with this. So that way, if we have any chips later, easy to replace. Unfortunately, for the skin tone, bring in the leg here, there is nothing quite like this. For whatever reason, the majority of the colors in the multi-surface range are very, very light. I don't know why. It's a bit annoying. A good starting point would potentially be this orange. So we'll probably be using this. I may have to mix a brown from another paint range with it, which isn't ideal, but it should function, because unfortunately the only brown I have for multi-surface is this coffee latte, which is very pale, and the two of them there aren't going to get us there. So I'll probably end up introducing potentially some flat brown from the Vallejo model colors. It should work just fine. We won't be using as much of it, so it shouldn't really interfere with the adhesion. We'll find out. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. But the only place we have to paint that is right up here. So, get to painting on those. I will try to film some of that, unlike sanding, which has been a mess to try to cover on camera. And I'll integrate that here. Alright. Alright, so mix the paint. I had to use the Vallejo flat brown like I thought I would, and I used the pure orange. The multi-surface is the main one, but I did actually mix in some engine red, some pink melon, and some baby pink. I'm not sure if all those were needed, that's just what I did. And I will now apply it and we'll see how this looks. Very simple, we're just going to paint directly on here. I require 2-3 coats, nothing major. Let this dry and see how this looks. It's looking decent so far. Of course, the orange underneath is going to interfere with the color we're getting. That's not necessarily a bad thing with this skin tone, though, because we need it to be, it's a skin tone. It needs to be nice and vibrant. So painting on top of orange is not the worst choice, frankly. Just small strokes, I say. Small brush here. And all the sanding marks are being covered pretty well. That's not a bad skin tone for this. Let's see here. Pull up so I can make sure I'm getting the brush lines removed. Pretty decent first coat. And brush off so it doesn't stick. And let's see. When that dries, I think that's pretty good. It might be a bit too vibrant. Might have to mix some brown in, but that's not bad. That works. So I'll now paint the other arm, and I'll be back.